Hi, this is Deirdre Bialo, Padin of Bialo Padin Designs. Thank you so much for watching. I am going to give you a brief idea of who I am and the kind of work that I do. Um, I've been making jewelry and tools and accessories for the fiber community for about 15 years at this point. I have a YouTube video, and the Vermont Sheep and Wool Festival website has a link to it, and that'll give you more of an idea of what inspires my work and gives you a sort of fancy slideshow for some of my pieces. What I want to do today is to be more informal and to give you a studio tour of my tiny studio and to talk to you about some of the projects that I've been working on during the pandemic, and also give you an idea of the path that I took so that I wound up making accessories and tools for the fiber community. I've been playing around with Facebook Live, and I'm realizing it's kind of limited. So if you have questions, post them in the comments and I'll get to them at the end of my talk. And I can always schedule a Zoom meeting for a more informal chat to go over particular items on my Etsy shop. If you have questions, I'll be happy to model everything that I have on the shop and make suggestions for what might or might not work for you. So, who am I? So I started making jewelry about 15 years ago because I married a musician, and to be surrounded by music inspired in me a desire to be creative. And so I started taking classes, and I discovered how much I love open flame and how much I love hammering. So I took a lot of silversmithing and blacksmithing classes. So that involves you have to heat the metal in order to make it malleable in order to hammer. So here is an example. This is what's called a quake, a Scottish drinking vessel. So this all started as a sheet of flat silver. And so everything had to be hammered to be raised up, and then pieces had to be soldered under high flame. And here's another example. So this is a tea strainer that I made. So we've got tiny little holes, and each one of these components is fabricated by hand. I carved the handle. So I made the base. Each of these are hollow, and makes fun tea drinking kind of fun. Then I realized that while I loved silversmithing to make this, a beautiful bowl, what got me really, really excited was hammering. So it was the idea of creating an organic object. So here I created a stand for my silver bowl. So you've got this cool combination of the smooth surface of the bowl and then these wonderful hammered leaves. This technique is called fold forming. So in order to create those undulations in the metal, you have to hammer the surface on the edge. So you can see the hammer marks on the side. So that displaces the metal. And then when you heat it up and open it up again, you get this wonderful surface, which is unpredictable and undulating, and it makes me think of mountainous landscapes. And then you can do so many things with this object that has gone from being flat to three-dimensional. So I started making cuff bracelets. I don't know how well this you can see. These are not on my Etsy shop because you have to really fit them to fit the wrist so that they're comfortable, but we could talk about that. So what I found really engaging about making jewelry is the process. Hammering is wonderful. And then how do you put a piece together? So for example, this necklace that I'm wearing, I'll stand up, has a lot of components because it's mobile. So this is not waxed carved. This starts off with sheets with wire that have to be formed and soldered together. And then you have to be careful that you know what sequence you're putting everything together so that it doesn't melt into a ball of silver at the end. So there's just the intellectual process of how do I get from a piece of flat metal to and wire to something that's three-dimensional, like a little pillbox, which has an incredible number of components, all of which have been soldered together. So all of this involves hammering, which is really noisy, which gets me to why I make knitting objects. So I've got, I'm going to give you a tour of the studio, but before I turn the camera around, behind me is my anvil. There's a problem with that because my husband's music studio is right underneath. And so depending upon what instrument he's playing, it's kind of rude for me to be hammering. So if it's a saxophone, a really loud clarinet, not a problem. But when he starts singing or playing the cittern or a guitar, it's just rude to hammer. So that's my way of an explanation of why I became a knitter, because I like hanging around with him and I don't want to interrupt his music making. So I started knitting because if you love gemstones, which I do, as you can see, and my earrings, you're going to love yarn, right? And you're going, if you like making things, one of the reasons why I love doing fiber shows is because fiber customers get what it means to make something that takes weeks, months to make, that's complicated, that's all done by hand. And what I love about all of you is you go, yeah, oh, I get that. I understand. There's value in what you're doing. I understand the process, even if I don't understand this particular process. So I went from making, doing blacksmithing to knitting. I do both. And once I started knitting, it wasn't very far because somebody who works with their hands wants to work with beautiful objects. If you're working with gorgeous merino wool, why are you working with a bunch of slippery aluminum needles that slip through your hands? That's my thought process. And then also there was sort of an intermediate step where I had long hair, and again, I'm going to show you the studio, but in order to make all of this, I have to use open flame. I have to solder. And if I solder, you got to keep your hair out of the face because the smell of burnt hair is really bad. So I've got the fire extinguisher, but what's also really important is that I started making hairpins. This is going to work because during the pandemic, I got a little excited and I took scissors to my hair. So I don't have much hair anymore to show you. But the idea was that I would start decorating my hair and get the hair out of my way. And then so you have this really cool little hair ornament. And then when I started knitting, I would realize like, oh my God, I forgot to make a buttonhole. And then I started making all of these lace shawls and they're like, what am I going to do? I forgot to make the buttonhole and I'm a metalsmith. I have metal all over the place. It was another opportunity to go like, I could make something. Oh my goodness. So we're going to get cat bombed because I've got a cat here who really loves videos. So don't be surprised when she shows up. So I had hairpins. Oh, I could modify them. I could make shawl pins. So I started making shawl pins for myself. First of all, I was just sticking the hairpins in the sweater. And then I was like, oh, let's make this a little bit more secure. And then I realized I went to a museum and I saw Bronze Age shawl pins, cloak pins. And I thought, gosh, that's brilliant. It's two pins. It's got the stem and the stem is attached to the outer ring, which means that you don't lose one of the two pieces, which happens all the time to me at least. So it's attached. It lies flat. So I was making all of these lace shawls, and why would I want to make a big knot in something that's really delicate yarn? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I was like, oh, I can make shawl pins. So that's kind of the convoluted way that I wound up into the fiber community. I think most of us take paths to our lives that we don't even recognize was a path until we look at it from hindsight. So here I am 15 years later. Oh, and here's the cat. So I make silver and gold jewelry. I love gemstones. I work with gemstones. I love complicated pieces. So these earrings, these are hollow constructions. So this little gemstone, this tourmaline, is sitting inside of a little box. And here's the cat. This is Shadow. You'll see her a lot, I'm afraid. Come on, go down. Um, so, uh, so, so I continue to make these, and I make shawl pins. And then a couple of years ago, I started learning how to do cable knitting. I'm still really spastic at it, but I discovered that, or for me at least, the large commercially available cable needles I found slippery, so I would keep dropping my stitches. I would keep dropping the cable needles. So what I had discovered from blacksmithing, I had learned how to twist wire in different directions to create texture. And so what I did was I worked from the large scale of blacksmithing and then coming down to silversmithing and then jewelry making, where you're working with smaller and smaller components. And I realized that twisted wire serves a couple of purposes. I started by using it for hairpins, because I've now learned so much about all the different textures of women's hair. So for finer, slippery hair, I realized that twisted wire works really well in for fine hair, because it catches the hair without pulling on the scalp. And that's really important when you're working with someone who's got dreads or locks. For black women, there's a problem. You just don't want to damage the roots of the hair. So that's why I started making hairpins with twisted wire. And then when I started making, so we've got, the cat is here, I'm afraid. So where was I? Okay, so then when I started doing cable needles, I was like, I could use the same idea. I could use twisted metal wire, so that offers a little bit of resistance in the yarn so that it doesn't go slipping out all over the place. For people who are experienced cable knitters, you're going to look at me and going like, honey, you could just do this without the cable needles, which is true, but not for me. So I started making cable needles, and they're in the other room, but I'll show you in a moment or two. So that's what I said. Things just evolve. So what I'm going to do now is get the cat to step down. I'm just looking at my notes because I made a little script for myself. Okay, I'm going to do a little studio tour now. So what I'm going to do is turn the camera around and show you what my work environment is and some of the stuff that I've been working on. Before I do that, I should just say that during the pandemic, the cost of silver and gold has risen astronomically. So for me, I started looking around in the way a lot of us have done during the pandemic, where it's like, okay, let me start working through the contents of my pantry. Let me start doing all the stuff that I haven't wanted to deal at for years. So everyone has had pandemic projects, and what I have done is looked around my studio and said, okay, so where are the bits and pieces of metal that I have from other projects? And what can I do with them? Because I've discovered that what inspires me is problem solving. So when I'm at fiber shows and people say, this is what I need. I need a Portuguese knitting pin that I can wear over here, and it's got to look like this, but it's got to look pretty. And I'm like, on it. Or someone will say, okay, I need to be this size, because all of you who work with fiber, you know exactly what kind of a tool you need to get done. And for me, that's a source of inspiration. And so if someone says, this is what I need, I'm on it. And so when I started looking around my studio during the pandemic, I was, okay, what could I do with these scraps of metal? I could put them in for recycling, but there's a lot of wasted energy in recycling metal. Why can't I use it as a source of inspiration to make jewelry? And so that's what I've been doing. So I'll start off by saying the COVID virus is a crown virus. That's why it's called COVID. So I started making COVID crowns, because if you're going to decorate yourself while wearing a face mask, that means that this is exposed as opposed to the rest of you that isn't. So I know it's me being silly, but it was also just, okay, how do you decorate yourself under these circumstances? Let's treat it as a challenge. All right, so I'm now going to hopefully not trip over the cat or my anvil or all the other things in these really small quarters. to give you a tour of my studio and show you some of the stuff that I'm working on. It's not pretty. It's not neat, but that's what it is. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so every one of my surfaces in my studio has projects that I'm working on. So over here, what you saw in those big leaves for holding up the silver bowl, I am using scraps of metal to make smaller leaves in order to make earrings. These are copper that I will patina, but all this has been hammered and folded in order to create that three-dimensional surface that I love. I'm also working on an idea for earrings here, handmade links, some other earrings ideas. These will have gemstones. These are all just prototypes. So what you're looking at here is a jeweler's bench with all the soldering equipment. There's a fire extinguisher at my feet because you can't have a open flame without a fire extinguisher. All of my files, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Then moving over here is my bench where I have lots of other tools, and also my pickles and chemicals, and the cat, which is right over here. Let me push her down, and we have gemstones. So this is really, really close quarters. Hang on a second. I have to juggle everything here. Okay. All right. And here is the anvil. I have so many hammers, but I collect hammers the way some people collect shoes. Well, I collect shoes too. So these are some of the hammers that I use to create the leaves that you saw. And here's the anvil that I'm hopefully not going to trip on. There's the cat. There are so many tools that you can use to create 3 dimensions in metal. So these are daps and punches in order to bend metal over the surface. These are some of my collections of hammers. So many hammers. I have so many hammers other places. Here is a tree trunk, and I can tell you, as somebody who lives in Brooklyn, for me this was a score. It's not so easy to find tree trunks in Brooklyn. What's important is that the surface is softer than metal, so you can hammer on it and without deforming the metal, and then move from the wood to a metal stake. So what you've got here, let me just, so here is a rolling mill. So in order to, metal, you always adjust your tools, you always adjust your metal. So here is a rolling mill, and what that does is you can create wire in different shapes and make it thinner. And then you've got a vise, and then this is what's called a stake. These are metal stakes. Metal stakes come in so many different shapes and sizes. So I will use this Christmas tree stake in order to create circular shapes of different widths. I've got my other stakes that are put away. Let's see, what else can I show you? All right, so I've got gazillion tools and a gazillion projects. At any given time, I will have hundreds of projects to keep me busy. All right, I'm losing track of the time here. Okay, so on my Etsy shop, I have tons of shawl pins. So I showed you some of the hairpins, and then this is what they look like. I'm happy to take more photographs and to go on Zoom to give you a better idea. So let me move over here. I've taken out some of my stock to give you an idea of what there is. So here, these are Penangular brooches. I have a YouTube video that shows you how to use a Penangular brooch, because my customers have often contacted me to say, love what you made, got it, I forgot how to use it. And so here are also more shawl pins of different types. I try to have a range of sizes according to people's aesthetic. And then some more of the bracelets, which aren't on my Etsy shop, but these are my true love because I do love hammering. These are hairpins and shawl pins. I like to have multifunctional pieces of jewelry. And then here are my cable needles. So I've got 3 styles. I've got fishhook in 3 different thicknesses. I have the gull wing. I've discovered that cable knitters have very strong opinions about what size and shape of needle. And then I have straight needles. Sock knitters like to have longer ones, and then there's some folks who like to have them in their little Altoid toolbox. And then over here, this is just some examples of some of the jewelry that I'm making. I've been playing around with the idea of petals and then combining them with a vine-like bales at the top, and to get to create that organic shape. As I said, I love hammering, so these earrings have, very strong hammered surfaces because they catch the light and because I think it looks beautiful. My mother and grandmother were both sewers. I actually have over here my mother's sewing machine from the 1930s. What I did was start weaving fabric out of silver. Let's see if you can see. And then cut up the fabric that I wove in order to use as components in making earrings, because again, it's the idea of creating 3 dimensions out of flat metal and something that catches the light, and also each of the weaves are all a little bit different. And so this is just an example of some gemstones. These are garnets, which are an unusual color. They're hessonite garnets. And again, I'm playing around with the petal shape here. And then over here, this is the recycled metal that I'm using. So I've been using alcohol inks and gold foil. And here I had some aluminum siding that I cut up, hammered, colored, and to create really fun earrings. And I'm just looking around. I'm just going to set myself down, and I should do a time check. Let me turn this around. So, does anyone have questions for me? I would be happy to answer questions. It's kind of awkward doing this, but please put something in your comments section. And what I should probably do, because I just discovered that the video doesn't tell me how much time has elapsed, because I don't want to get in the way of other vendors' time slots. So does anyone have questions for me? Okay, so do I have to tell you something else? I don't know what else to say. What else can I say? Oh gosh, folks, this is what I would say to you. I wish that you were in my booth so that I could help you decorate yourself, answer your questions. I'm happy to do that. My Etsy shop, I have put on virtually all of my stock. Oh, this is Shadow once again. I would love to interact with you in some way, shape, or form. I love what I do, and my hope is that we will all meet up again in some future fiber show. If you've got particular requests, let me know. I keep a running list of what customers are looking for. I had been working on some Portuguese knitting pins. You'll see them in that larger YouTube video that I did. I bought 40 pounds of exotic wood cutoffs, because who wouldn't want 40 pounds of exotic wood cutoffs? And it was an opportunity for me to do some silver inlay in wood, because I had such a good time with that wooden handle that I made for the tea strainer. And then I discovered that each exotic wood has its own personality, and some work better with certain varnishes than with others, and some like and are receptive to some glues and not the other. And so my magnets started falling off because they didn't like the chemical interaction with the exotic woods. Who knew? So I don't have any Portuguese knitting pins right now, but I have identified the woods like zircote that work well with the glue that I have available. So I will have more Portuguese knitting pins. And the next step is someone has asked me to start making spinning wheel orifice hooks, which gives me another exciting opportunity to create something that's decorative and practical. So that's kind of what I've got in the works. If you have other fiber tool needs, I would love to hear about them. because I've got a whole bunch of ideas that I want to play around with, but I'm receptive to working on something new and different. So I'm going to end the video. I thank you so much for watching. I hope you have found this entertaining. I think the cat has, because she's still here. And I look forward to hearing from you. So email me, ask for a Zoom chat. You know, tell me what you're thinking and what you want. Okay? Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.